The air in the high Sierras was thin and sharp, smelling of pine and cold stone. For Liam, Sarah, Mark, and Chloe, it was the smell of freedom, a welcome escape from the concrete sprawl of Los Angeles. They were four friends bound by a shared love for the untamed corners of the world. Liam, a natural leader with a calm demeanor, checked his GPS. According to the map, the old miner's trail should start just beyond those rocks, he announced, his voice steady. Should be a great view from there. Sarah, the group's unofficial documentarian, raised her camera, the lens a prosthetic eye seeking beauty. Hold that thought, Liam. The light is perfect. She framed a shot of the ancient pines, their needles catching the golden afternoon sun. As she panned across the landscape, her lens caught an unnatural reflection. Something was half buried in a drift of snow near a cluster of granite boulders, drinking the sunlight and throwing it back not as a sparkle, but as a deep, light-swallowing gleam. "Guys, what is that?" she said, lowering her camera. Mark, ever the impulsive one, was already moving towards it. "Probably just some weird piece of junk someone left up here." But as he drew closer, his confident stride slowed. The object was a perfect cube, roughly a foot on each side. Its surface was a flawless, jet-black material that seemed to defy the ruggedness of its surroundings. It was impossibly smooth, like polished obsidian, yet it absorbed light in a way that made it look like a hole in reality. He knelt, his breath misting in the cold air. Curiosity, a powerful and sometimes foolish motivator, drove him to reach out. The moment his gloved fingers brushed the surface, a low, resonant hum vibrated up his arm, a sound he felt more than heard. A sharp jolt, like a powerful static shock, made him snatch his hand back with a yelp. "Whoa! Did you guys feel that?" he asked, his voice a mix of awe and alarm. He looked at his hand, then back at the cube. "It's warm." Liam and Chloe exchanged a skeptical look before cautiously approaching. The hum was undeniable now, a subtle thrumming that seemed to emanate not just from the cube, but from the very air around it. Liam, ever the pragmatist, removed his glove. "Let's not be hasty," he started to say, but his own curiosity betrayed him. His bare fingers met the smooth, warm surface. The hum intensified in his mind, and the world seemed to tilt for a fraction of a second. He pulled back, his face pale. "Okay, that's not normal." An unspoken question hung in the freezing air. What was this thing? A strange magnetic pull seemed to emanate from the object, silencing their rational minds. Drawn by this irresistible force, Sarah and Chloe joined the men, and as if guided by an unseen choreographer, all four of them placed their hands on the cube at the same time. The world did not just tilt. It shattered. There was no sound, no physical sensation, just a violent plunge into a reality that was not their own. One moment they were in the snowy Sierras, the next they were standing under a sky of burning crimson choked with the silver dust of dying stars. Before them, a city of towering crystalline structures that defied gravity crumbled into powder. The air itself tasted of ash and sorrow. They were not just watching, they were feeling. They felt the collective grief of a billion souls, as slender, elegant beings with large, mournful, almond-shaped eyes looked up at their sky for the last time. A creeping, formless void, a darkness that was not just the absence of light, but the absence of existence, consumed their world. It was a vision of a genocide on a cosmic scale, a silent psychic scream that bypassed their ears and tore directly at their hearts. They felt the loss of art, of science, of love, of an entire civilization's history turning to dust. And beneath the despair, a final, desperate sliver of hope. A last message cast into the void. Just as suddenly as it began, It was over. They ripped their hands away from the cube as one, collapsing backward into the snow, gasping for air. Their chests heaved and tears streamed down their faces, freezing on their cheeks. They looked at each other, their eyes wide with a shared horror. No one needed to ask. They knew with a certainty that defied all logic that they had all seen the exact same thing. The cube sat silently in the snow, its hum gone, its surface once again inert and cold.
The hike back down the mountain was a frantic, paranoid retreat. The sun began its descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple that were eerily reminiscent of the burning world from their vision. The majestic beauty of the Sierra Nevada now felt alien and menacing. Every rustle of leaves in the wind sounded like furtive footsteps. Every gnarled tree branch looked like a grasping limb in the deepening shadows. They didn't speak. The shared memory was a raw, gaping wound in their minds, too profound and terrifying for words. They moved with a desperate urgency, their hiking poles clattering against rocks, the sound unnaturally loud in the heavy silence. Liam led the way, his calm facade shattered, replaced by a grim, tight-lipped focus. Sarah clutched her camera like a talisman, not daring to take a single picture. Mark, usually so boisterous, was pale and withdrawn. Chloe trembled, occasionally stumbling, her eyes darting into the trees. The resonant hum of the cube, though now physically gone, still echoed in the hollows of their minds. It was a phantom limb, a constant, low-frequency reminder of the cosmic horror they had inadvertently witnessed. They were no longer just four friends on a weekend adventure. They were contaminated. They were keepers of a terrible galactic secret, and the weight of it pressed down on them, heavier than the thin mountain air. The world they had woken up in that morning was gone forever, replaced by one where the universe was not only larger and stranger than they had imagined, but also infinitely more tragic. Image prompt for Chapter 3. Four hikers descending a mountain trail in the Sierra Nevada, their faces filled with paranoia and fear, constantly looking back as if being followed by unseen entities among the dark pine trees. They finally reached their dust-covered SUV as dusk settled, turning the world into a canvas of gray and black. The relief of seeing the familiar vehicle was a brief, shallow breath before the next plunge into fear. Liam fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking. As they piled in, the slam of the car doors sounded like gunshots in the quiet wilderness. He steered the SUV onto the winding two-lane road that led away from the trailhead. For the first 10 miles, the only light came from their headlights cutting a tunnel through the darkness. Then a new light appeared in the rearview mirror, two perfect circles of white, closing the distance with unnatural speed. It was a black, government-style sedan. Its windows were tinted to an impenetrable black, and it lacked any discernible make or model markings. It was a ghost, an unnamed shark in the mountain dark. It settled in behind them, maintaining a steady distance of about 100 yards. It never tried to overtake, and when Liam slowed down, it slowed down with him. "Is that a cop?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling. "No. No lights, no markings." Mark twisted in his seat. "Lose him." His jaw tightened. At the next junction, he swerved abruptly onto a deserted logging road, the tires crunching on the gravel. The SUV bucked and shuddered, but he kept his foot on the accelerator. He glanced in the mirror. For a heart-stopping moment, the road behind them was empty. Then, the black sedan's headlights swung into view, following them onto the rough track without a moment's hesitation. The feeling of being watched had now solidified into a terrifying, undeniable reality. They weren't just paranoid, they were being hunted. Image prompt for Chapter 4. A tense view from inside a car, looking at the rear-view mirror, which reflects a menacing black, unmarked sedan following closely on a winding, forested mountain road at dusk. They drove for hours, finally shaking the sedan after a series of desperate maneuvers through a small town's back alleys. They didn't stop until they were across the state line in Nevada, checking into a cheap, anonymous motel under a fake name. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. They locked the door, wedged a chair under the handle, and finally allowed themselves to breathe. For the first time since the vision, they started to talk. They pieced together fragments, describing what they remembered, what they felt. It was Sarah, the artist, who brought order to the chaos. With a pen from the motel desk and a stack of napkins, she began to sketch. She drew the crumbling crystalline towers, the formless void in the sky. "The stars," she murmured, her hand moving with a certainty she didn't feel. Chloe, an amateur astronomer, leaned in closer. Her breath caught in her throat. She recognized patterns, but they were distorted, skewed. "That's Orion," she said, pointing with a shaking finger. "But the belt stars are too far apart. And that nebula, it's not where it should be." She grabbed another napkin and began her own frantic calculations. After several minutes, she looked up, her eyes wide with a terrifying understanding. "It's a star map," she whispered, the words hanging in the silent room. "But it's not a map from Earth. The perspective is wrong. It's a map seen from somewhere else, somewhere deep in another galaxy." She pointed back to Sarah's drawing of the crimson sky. "That's not just a vision of their world ending. It's a set of instructions, a three-dimensional chart showing the way from their dying system to ours." The cube was not just a recording. It was a message in a bottle cast across an ocean of stars.
Their borrowed time ran out at a dusty 24-hour gas station in the middle of the Nevada desert. As Mark was filling the tank, the familiar black sedan pulled silently into the station on the opposite side of the pumps. Two men in identical dark suits and sunglasses, despite the late hour, stepped out. They moved with an unnerving, synchronized efficiency, their faces completely devoid of expression. "Liam, go!" Sarah screamed from the passenger seat. There was no time to think, only to react. Mark ripped the nozzle from the tank, gas splashing on the concrete, and dove into the back seat. Liam slammed the SUV into gear, the tires screeching as he swerved around the pumps and shot out onto the empty highway. The sedan was right behind them in an instant, its engine roaring to life with a power that belied its bland appearance. What followed was a high-speed chase under a canopy of indifferent stars. The sedan was faster, more agile. It clung to their bumper, attempting to force them off the road. Liam's frantic driving was the only thing keeping them alive. He weaved through the sparse traffic, the blare of horns fading behind them. Seeing an exit for a suburban development, he took a desperate gamble, careening off the highway into a maze of identical-looking streets. He killed the headlights, took a series of sharp, random turns, and finally slid the SUV into the dark shadow of an overgrown hedge between two houses. They held their breath, listening, their hearts hammering against their ribs. The sedan's powerful engine roared past the end of the street and continued on. They had escaped, but they knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The hunters were relentless, and they were running out of places to hide. They found refuge in an abandoned barn, the air thick with the smell of hay and decay. For 2 days they lived on junk food and fear, watching the road through cracks in the wooden walls. The cube, which they had wrapped in a blanket and hidden under a floorboard, was a silent, ominous presence. On the third night, Mark couldn't take the waiting anymore. While the others slept fitfully, he retrieved the cube. He had to know more. He had to understand why. The first vision was of death. What was the point of sending a message of pure despair? He sat on the dusty floor, the heavy cube in his lap. Bracing himself, he placed both hands firmly on its cool obsidian surface. The vision came again, but this time it was different. There was no fire, no crumbling towers. He was floating through a world of vibrant, impossible life. He saw forests of crystalline trees that chimed in the wind, oceans of bioluminescent flora, and skies filled with graceful multi-winged creatures. He saw the slender, elegant beings not in despair, but in a state of deep, communal concentration. They were weaving strands of light, encoding information, life itself, into the very structure of the cube. He understood. The cube wasn't a tombstone, it was a seed, an ark. It contained the complete genetic and cultural blueprint of their entire civilization. The vision of destruction wasn't just a memory, it was a warning. The star map wasn't just an address, it was a path to safety. The cube was a desperate, final act of preservation sent into the void with the hope that it would find fertile ground. And the visions were a key guiding the finders to the one place on Earth where that seed could be safely planted. The final set of coordinates, unlocked by Mark's second vision, pointed them to a remote, almost inaccessible gorge in Zion National Park, Utah. It took them another day of driving and a grueling 6-hour hike far from any marked trail. They were exhausted, running on fumes of adrenaline and a desperate sense of purpose. The vision had shown them a hidden waterfall, and as they rounded a massive rock formation, they heard its roar. There it was, a curtain of white water cascading down a sheer rock face into a turquoise pool. Just as they had seen it, hidden behind the waterfall was the dark opening to a cave. Pushing through the cold, misty spray, they stepped out of the earthly world and into something else entirely. The air inside the cave was warm, dry, and hummed with a strange latent energy that made the hairs on their arms stand up. The narrow entrance opened into a vast cathedral-like cavern. The walls and ceiling were covered in giant, milky white crystals, some as thick as ancient trees. They pulsed with a soft internal light, illuminating the immense space in an ethereal glow. This was the sanctuary, the cradle, the one place on the planet that could resonate with the cube's energy. As they stood in the center of the cavern, dwarfed by its scale and beauty, they knew this was where their journey was supposed to end and where something unimaginably new was meant to begin.
As they reached the heart of the cavern, a flat, altar-like rock platform, the cube in Liam's hands began to pulse with a soft, warm light, its hum returning, stronger than ever. They had made it. A shared look of exhausted triumph passed between them. Then, the sacred silence was shattered. Bright, sharp beams from powerful flashlights cut through the ethereal glow, pinning them in place. Figures in black tactical gear poured into the cavern from the entrance behind the waterfall. The lead agent, a man with a hard face and cold eyes, stepped forward. "By the authority of the United States government, step away from the artifact," his voice boomed, the harsh, human sound a desecration in this alien sanctuary. "Place it on the ground and put your hands in the air." They were surrounded, the beams of light blinding them. Liam held the cube tighter to his chest. He looked at his friends, Sarah, defiant, Mark, resolute, Chloe, terrified but standing her ground. Then he looked at the cube, now glowing like a captured star. They had a choice. They could surrender this ark, the last hope of an entire civilization, to men who would only dissect it, weaponize it, and lock its secrets away in a concrete bunker. Or they could fulfill its purpose, honor the silent scream they had witnessed, and face the utterly unknown consequences for their own world. "This doesn't belong to you," Liam said, his voice shaking but clear. "It's not a weapon." The agent took another step forward. "You have no idea what it is. You are out of your depth. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Liam locked eyes with Sarah. In that single, silent glance, a decision was made. It wasn't a choice born of logic, but of empathy. They had felt a world die. They could not be the ones to extinguish its last ember of life. With a final deep breath, Liam turned and placed the cube onto the flat central altar. The moment the obsidian surface made contact with the crystal, the world went white. It was not an explosion of sound and fury, but a silent, beautiful, overwhelming release of pure energy. A blinding light erupted from the cube, not of destruction, but of creation. The agents cried out, shielding their eyes, but the four friends simply watched, their fear replaced by a profound sense of awe. The light flowed like water through the cavern, and in its wake, life bloomed. The energy infused the very rock and air. Strange bioluminescent mosses and hues of sapphire and emerald spread instantly across the crystal walls. Delicate crystalline plants like glass flowers sprouted from the ground, unfurling their glowing petals in seconds. The air filled with the scent of unknown blossoms and the sound of soft, harmonic chimes. It wasn't an invasion, it was a birth. When the light subsided, the cube was gone. In its place, a miniature glowing ecosystem pulsed with gentle life. The government agents stood frozen, their weapons lowered, their faces slack with disbelief. The four friends looked at each other, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of an alien genesis. They were no longer just hikers, no longer fugitives. They were midwives to a new world, now hidden and safe beneath the old. The future was a complete unknown. They didn't know what would happen to them or what this new life would become. But in that moment, standing in the heart of a miracle, it felt like hope.